I have no idea how to tell if this is actually on or not right now. Hang on a sec.
Zero viewers.
Oh, it is. It's working. I can see it on my iPad. So, welcome everyone. Oh, yeah, someone is here. So, if you're tuning in and you're saying hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. We cannot see your names in this live video. We can only see your comments. So, you can leave your name and where you're tuning in from so that we can actually address you. But I am here live with Emma from Black Chalk Co. And do
Hello.
you say Black Chalk Co. or do you say Black Chalk Collective?
Mostly co, because it's too many extra syllables.
That's what I thought. So, yeah, I'm super excited to have you here because it's my first live interview. And thankfully, I'm doing it with someone I've actually met in real life before, just in case this technology sort of craps out. This is a brand new kind of program that I'm testing. And so I can pop up these little comments here and stuff. So it'll be kind of a nice way to communicate. So I'm just looking at the comments. We have Trinidad and Tobago. Wow. Pennsylvania, New York, the UK, Indiana, Texas, New Jersey, Michigan, and then just an LOL. But yeah, so we have a ton to get to, but I figure I have to do a little housekeeping before we get started. So for anybody who's here, I'm just going to explain a little bit of how this is going to work. It's a little different than most of our live videos, obviously, because there's two of us here, but also because it's going to be a little longer and because a lot of the questions have been submitted ahead of time. So what we're going to do is Emma and I are about to start talking. We're going to be talking about transitioning from a passion to a business and all the things that come with that. And because the questions have been submitted ahead of time, we're able to kind of look over them beforehand and kind of combine some together that made sense to go together. And then when we start talking, we're going to stop looking at the comments that are coming in. Not because we don't want to see your comments, but just because we have a lot of information to get to. So don't bother posting your questions as we're talking. You can keep them for the end. And if we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll do kind of a lightning round with Emma where you guys can just shoot questions in the comments and I'll pop them up on the screen and she can answer them for you. So yeah, so hold your questions to the end. And you can feel free to chat with each other in the chat if you want to, but I think you're going to want to be listening because there's a lot of knowledge bombs coming your way. And yeah, so again, welcome, Emma. And for anybody who doesn't know you, can you just give us kind of a little rundown of who you are and what you do and anything else you want to tell us?
Oh yeah. Hi, I'm Emma. I'm 29 from Melbourne. I have been running Black Chalk Collective or Black Chalk Co since the end of 2015 and I took it full time in August last year. So in terms of what I do now, it's a range of stuff. I teach people online, in real life, things like calligraphy, brush lettering, watercolor. I do some corporate work for mostly business clients, not really individuals. And then I also run a publication called Penultimate Magazine, which is basically a lettering and calligraphy magazine. And before all of that happened, I was just in the corporate world. So I'd been spending the last 7 years in admin, HR, and working as an executive assistant.
Perfect, succinct answer. But there's a lot packed in there that I think we need to talk about. So actually, one of our listeners submitted a question ahead of time that is really good to kick us off. So Taylor asked, how did you start lettering? I know you talked about how long you've been doing it for, but how did you actually start?
Yeah, so I guess I'm probably a little bit different to a lot of people who are wanting to turn this into a business because I had the business concept before I knew what lettering was. I wanted to create greeting cards, so have a pretty savage sense of humor, and I thought it'd be funny to make greeting cards out of that. But having no graphic design experience, I figured I would just draw them and then try and digitize them and go from there. And that's how I discovered lettering. I was on Instagram or Pinterest and was seeing all this cool stuff pop up, and then luckily there was like only one workshop in Melbourne on the topic. So I went along to that, and that kind of kickstarted everything for me. So I didn't really know what lettering was. I had the business idea before the lettering came into it.
I think that's so interesting because it was the same for me. I just really liked making Christmas cards, and I was always using those little stickers that you could buy at the art store, and I never like did my own lettering on them. And I don't know, I thought I could run a business just making beautiful cards like that. But when I started learning the calligraphy, that's when I got like super obsessed. Is that what the same kind of thing was for you?
Yeah, it was unexpected. Like, I turned to Instagram to find customers, I suppose. I figured I was going to launch Valentine's Day cards. This was November, December. And so I needed to build some kind of audience to launch to. So I was just going to post behind the scenes snippets of learning how to make them. So I started posting lettering videos, and then everyone was like, oh, how do you do that? And then I got a buzz out of showing other people or just talking to them about stuff. And by the time Valentine's Day rolled around, no one really gave a crap about the cards.
I think it's so funny how quickly those things can change for sure. So the other part of that question was, I mean, you talked about how you decided to turn it into a business, but kind of what were your first steps when you started doing it?
Well, I guess, I always had the thing in the back of my mind that it would be a business. So I'd already kind of set up the basics for that. If you're in Australia, you have to get an Australian business number, an ABN. So it just kind of went from there. And I guess I've always just followed what people have wanted of me. Obviously now I have more of a strategy and, things that I don't want to go away from. But in the beginning I was like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And it started off really small. I think a lot of people perhaps join Instagram and they see people like us and they just think, I can do this immediately. But it doesn't start like that. Like, I think it was 6 months into learning it before anyone paid me anything for lettering.
So at the beginning, were you more focused on like making content and building an audience before you started thinking about selling anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I was more obsessed with the community side of things. So I would make my own lettering challenges. That's when we started Letter Archive. I used to have a blog that I would always post on, and I don't know where time for that exists anymore. But yeah, it was more about just making friends with people and talking about it. And, they're all still people that I talk to this day, yourself included. So it was, definitely more about making connections and that whole community vibe.
And then once, you had built a significant audience, like I don't even remember what kind of that timeline looked like for me. Do you remember what yours was like with in terms of like how many followers you got, how quickly?
I remember that it started off very slow. So I remember I was on Instagram for a month and I was like posting relentlessly, just like morning and night. And I think I had 40 followers after a month, and I was like, cool, 40. And
Probably like
I do
your
remember that.
high school.
Yeah, probably like all family and stuff. But I do remember when we started Letter Archive, things went pretty crazy pretty quickly because we'd involved so many artists and the exposure was huge for us. I think it was April, May, and we went from like both of us like up to 10,000 followers, then 20 within a week, and it just kind of skyrockets from there. But in the beginning, it was a pretty slow lift off. It was more just like the more involved you got with the community, the more it just kind of naturally came about. Your name was getting out there.
Yeah, and I think that's like a really big lesson for people who are listening and maybe struggling to get followers. Um, like Emma said, both of us had pretty small followers, and it wasn't until we started like really engaging with the community and getting involved with other people doing kind of the same things that it really took off for both of us. So when she's talking about Letter Archive, if you guys don't know what Letter Archive is, it's an account that we created where we were sharing work of other artists of single letters. So if you're ever needing inspiration for single letters and stuff like that, you can just go to @Letter Archive on Instagram and you can find that. But so what we did was we just asked other artists if they would be willing to contribute to this. And by getting the word out with other people, we started growing our own platforms that way. So those are always really good opportunities. And I think another thing that's kind of along the same lines is challenges, all those challenges that you can see all over Instagram and the hashtags that a lot of the community are using. That's a really good way to meet other people and kind of grow your platform that way. So I think
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good starting point for how to start your business is just focusing on building your audience first. It's really hard to launch a business before you have anybody listening to you, and it can kind of feel frustrating if you're, you know, putting stuff out into the world and nobody's listening. Um,
Absolutely. Okay.
so I guess once you had that though, and you started getting ready to sell your work or to do client work, Max asked a good question, which was, how do you know if you're good enough to start selling your work?
I love hate this question because it makes me sad that so many people don't think they're good enough to do it. Honestly, if one person wants you to make it for them, then that means you're good enough to do it. A lot of people fall into the trap of, oh, but why would you want me to do it? Like, there's so many other people out there that could do it better or whatever. It's not about that. It's the fact that someone's seen your stuff and they want it. That means that you're good enough to start selling it.
I totally agree. That's my exact answer anytime anyone asks me that is, if someone's willing to pay you for it, then you're good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, if we package all that into one, it's like build an audience, and kind of the people asking you to buy your work or to get work done from you is going to come. It's going to come from people seeing you putting stuff out there, no matter what. If nobody's buying it, it doesn't matter, and it'll start to build gradually.
Agree. And just a note on that as well is to only be posting stuff that you want to do. Like, I really don't like doing wedding work. I'm not a touchy-feely person. I'm not really interested in that kind of really manual, laborious work because I just like fast and exciting. And for me, that's why you don't see any envelope addressing on my feed, because I don't want someone to see it and then ask me to do it. So even if someone's not approaching you for what you want to do what you're interested in doing and keep putting it out there, because eventually someone's going to see it and then you'll get to do the work you actually want to do.
Which I think is a really good point, because it's really hard at the beginning to figure out exactly what you want to be doing. So it's definitely good advice to, you know, if you can't figure out what you want to do, just do it for free and do it on the side and do it to build yourself a portfolio and see what you do and don't like. Because same thing with me, I kind of took on everything and anything at the beginning and totally burnt myself out. And it was a really good learning experience, but I probably shouldn't have been doing it for money when I didn't know what I didn't want to do. So yeah, definitely start just experimenting with things and figuring out what you do and don't like. That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's easy to want to do all the things because it's exciting and there's so many things you can do with lettering. But I even remember having this conversation with my assistant, Rachel, because she was just doing all of the things. And I'm like, pick something, just go towards one thing. And then all of a sudden you kind of get known for that thing as well. So there's a good reason to focus on something as well.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of along those same lines, once you started doing that, how did you start putting yourself out there to get hired? Like how did you reach out to businesses? How did you reach out to people that you wanted to do work for, or did you not at all? Did they come to you?
Yeah, so I guess the thing that was lucky for me is that I didn't really have to reach out at all, especially in the beginning, because I had a full-time job. So I didn't really want to really overload myself with client work that I wouldn't be able to get done. And I was also at uni back then, so I wasn't reaching out at all. The cool thing about putting yourself out there on a place like Instagram is that you don't know who's going to see your work. You don't know who's going to find you and just think, oh, I've got this great idea, I'm going to ask this person to do it. The amount of times I've woken up and just seen a request in my inbox that's so weird but awesome, I couldn't tell you how many times. So I think if there's two things you're going to focus on, you know, having yourself out there, it would be something like Instagram, because it's visual, it suits our kind of what we do, and then having a website as well. So that's a whole nother ball game in terms of like website, what platform to use, SEO, all that kind of thing. But just having somewhere that, you know, can have a portfolio and show people that you're interested in doing other things, that's a bit more comprehensive than an Instagram account.
Actually, it's funny you bring up the website part, because that's actually the next question. I just wanted to touch really quickly on if you did want to reach out to businesses. I think there's always room for that. Like a lot of businesses don't realize that they have a use for what we do. And I think that even if they knew it existed, they might not know where to go to look for it or what to even look up on Google. So if you're interested in working for a business, just literally walk in there and ask them and tell them, you know, what you do and that you'd be interested in working with them, and leave them your name and number if you don't have business cards. Like, just making connections and genuine connections with other small businesses in your city can be huge. That's actually how I got a lot of my first big jobs and all of the spaces that I've been running workshops in, which we'll get to in a minute. I know a lot of people want to know about workshops, but I think it's definitely valuable to just reach out to people and not be afraid to do that. It can definitely work out in your favor too.
That's really true. My stepmom always tells random people what I do, and then they're like, oh, we could do this or do that, and that just sparks a whole nother conversation. So yeah, it's definitely worth doing that.
Yeah. So back to the website thing then. Cara asked, any thoughts on setting up a website, tips and tricks you learned along the way? So kind of what's like the history of your website for your business?
So I used to blog. It was a terrible blog. But when I started traveling, I just used to write stuff online, and I always used WordPress. I don't know why. It was probably just a free one that I found. So for me, I went straight there when I was starting my website. So I just used the free version. I think I ended up paying for like the business or the pro at some stage. And then it was only last year, so a year and a half into things, when I don't even know what the technical term is, I took it off that and put it on a self-hosted thing. I don't know. It took a whole Easter weekend and I almost cried, but it means that I could customize it a lot more and it wasn't going to look like everyone else's website. But since then, there's been all these other new ones pop up, and even something like Shopify. Say that you have very minimal requirements for a website. You only really want somewhere to put your products and maybe have a page for a blog. You could use something like that because they have all those different pages now, and it can look like a really funky, fully operational website, but is super simple to use. So I don't know. I think it's more just about testing out different platforms, trying out their free demos, and then also looking at the price, because all these things cost money.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of posts that compare the difference between kind of the main platforms. And pretty much what I know of the people in our industry, everyone is either using kind of one of three. So you have Shopify, WordPress, and Squarespace. And so I started on Squarespace, and I found it really, it was really easy to figure out. They have really good support, and there's a lot of stuff you can just Google and figure out and kind of put it together. They have some decent templates you can use. So if anybody's just listening and is like so overwhelmed by everything, Squarespace is a good spot to start. It just depends what you want to do with it in the long term, which I know can be overwhelming to think about at the beginning anyway. But Shopify is great for products, like Emma said. WordPress is really great if you want to customize and do lots of different things with it, or if you don't know, it's good to start off on WordPress because then you never have to migrate over to it if you change your mind. And Squarespace is kind of like a combination of the two, I would say, where you can kind of do a little bit of everything, but it's not super powerful at any one thing. I think that would probably be the easiest way that, or at least from my understanding, what I've learned along the way, because I've used a couple different ones at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I use all three of them, which makes my life super fun. So I have WordPress for Black Chalk, but I operate the shop through Shopify, and Penultimate's website is hosted at Squarespace. So I think as well, your needs are going to change. And like Becca said, you may as well like go with the one that you know can do it all in the beginning, and you can still start off free with WordPress. I had grand plans to do everything through WordPress, like my shop, my online course platform. But the reality is I'm not a developer and I can't really be bothered paying someone and waiting for it to be done. So I ended up just using external platforms and connecting them. So I think it just depends, what you want to do, but just keep in mind that could change down the track as well.
I think, like, to wrap it all up, if we're talking about client work and getting people to hire you for what you're doing, so we talked about you build an audience first, and then you want a website where someone can land and actually find out how to hire you. I think if you're freaking out about it, just chill. You don't need to do anything at this point. You can get a free website. You can get a really basic priced website and just get like an about page about you, contact page for someone to send you an email, and a couple pictures of your work. And that's better than nothing. So just start small and, you know, make sure that you're at least online and you have a place that people can find you. I think that's better than nothing at this point if people are really worried about it.
Actually, probably worth making a point about domain names as well. I don't think there's been a question about deciding business names, but that's always interesting because you've got to go and check out that all this stuff is available. Like, I think that was one of the first things I did when we named Black Chalk. I just signed up to absolutely everything in the world, every social media account to make sure I had the handle. And then, of course, you've got to get the domain as well. So I suppose if we backtrack even further, if you're at the point of picking a business name, you should probably look into this stuff now.
I think that's a really good point. I had a friend at the beginning who was into social media and marketing and stuff like that. And the first thing he told me to do was to go and sign up for all the different social medias with that account, even if you don't have intentions of using it right now, just so you have it in the future and so no one else can take it from you. And that's definitely a smart tip. Anything else you have on websites? Any other tips you learned along the way, like good places to learn from, or did you just kind of Google it and piece it together as you needed to?
Yeah, WordPress has like a huge archive of blogs and tutorials because it's so widely used. You can find, you know, so many tutes on the website. And that's how I learned how to, take it off the free one and self-host it externally. I just followed tutorials. So there's definitely information out there because, you know, I just don't have at this point, you know, I just don't want to invest the funds in my website because I don't really, you know, use that one all that much. So I guess it depends on your needs. But for those that are, as you said, overwhelmed and starting out, you don't need to have it all right now. You could even have just a landing page and just whenever you've got time up your sleeve, you know, schedule in a couple hours a month to just go and look at new things you can do to it. And it's all online. You can all find that stuff for free.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving on, you've got your audience looking for your stuff. You've got your website built. Now, a lot of people are asking about pricing. So how do you go about learning how to price, first of all, and how do you actually price when you're a beginner and you know that you're a beginner and you shouldn't really be charging the same as other people who might have been in the industry longer?
It's such a great topic and I probably could be here all day talking about it, so I won't. I guess the basics would be, most people are like, oh, I don't feel comfortable charging, or my friend or family member wants me to do this, should I do it? I guess the answer is if you're comfortable doing it. There's definitely been times where I've done jobs for friends and they're like, oh, I'll pay you for it. And I just never followed them up because I didn't care. It was just like, whatever, they're a mate. But, you know, you don't want to work for a business for free, I don't think, ever. But of course your pricing is going to change. And I'm so glad I'm not a beginner anymore. And I've always had, you know, if you're working full time, you've kind of got the luxury to play the numbers game. If you don't particularly have the time to do something and you're not that super keen on it, you can always just inflate your prices and hope that they'll go away. And if they don't, then you get paid extra and everybody wins. So there's so many different ways you can play it. There's no real straightforward answer. And in reality, there are so many variables down to like, what's their deadline? Are the materials hard to source? Are you sourcing them? And I think you guys should all check out the pricing guide that Becca put together with Joanne. I actually refer to it every now and then when just a random job that I don't do often pops up because there's like heaps of industry standards in there. So you can just have a starting point and be like, well, am I comfortable with that, or would I charge more or less? So I think that pricing guide is the perfect place to start.
Well, I'm glad you actually use it. That's awesome to hear. But yeah, if anyone's wondering about that, it's panicfreepricing.com. And we have free videos too that I think cover a lot of the mindset stuff. So yeah, you can go and check those 3 videos out. We give a lot of valuable stuff about pricing away in there. But a lot of it is mindset. So to me, I definitely agree. If you have a full-time job and you have the luxury of not really needing to make an income out of what you're doing, you can definitely kind of play it a little bit differently. But you have to also keep in mind that if you want to do something full-time down the line, you don't want to be doing your pricing all backwards just because you have a full-time job. So you don't want to just always be thinking, oh, I have a full-time job, I don't need this, because then later down the line, if you want to change your pricing it'll be a little bit harder. So it's definitely good to do some research at the beginning. I would say look into what other people in your area are charging, and if there's no one else in your area, look at other people in kind of the closest area and see what they're charging, because that's a really good indicator. And yeah, check out those free videos. I think they'll really, really help. But like Emma said, we could be here all day just talking about pricing. So I think we'll move on from that, and we can answer a couple more in the Q&As later at the end if we don't talk for an hour straight here. Okay, so one of the biggest questions we were getting was about workshops. So that's another big one. We could talk a lot about workshops, but I think that we should talk about workshops because a lot of the people in this group have learned calligraphy or have learned lettering and are ready to kind of take the next step. And one of those logical steps is teaching. So how did you set up and run your first workshop, and kind of how has that changed along the way?
Yeah, so I used to run events in my corporate life. So I had a fairly solid understanding of what I would need to run a successful workshop in terms of like the logistics of things. And I probably started off a little bit differently, and I'm not sure if this exists in other places in the world, but basically when I got started, I think it was at the point we had Letter Archive coming out and I'd amassed a decent following that I thought I would start offering it. But at the same time, I looked at my stats and there were about 7% of my followers in Australia. That's even less in Melbourne. So I didn't know whether the interest would be there. And I think everyone would have the fear of putting something out there and then no one wanting to do it. So what I actually did was approach a place called Laneway Learning Melbourne. They're in a few locations in Australia, and I think the idea exists in the UK or it's somewhere else, but basically they're an organisation that has this huge database of people that just want to learn stuff. So they run workshops a couple nights a week in the city. They go for 75 minutes. They cost between $10 and $20 for participants, and the teachers get like $50. But basically anyone can be a teacher as well. So if you're an accountant in your day-to-day job, you can go teach, budgeting or whatever. So I approached them and just said, look, here's some of my work and what I do. Do you think this would make a good class? And they're like, we don't know. Let's see. And I remember when it went up online, it went up on a Monday at 9 a.m. and by lunchtime, 24 people had sold it out. And I was like, what? So that was really cool, but it was also very unrealistic in terms of how a normal workshop would run. 75 minutes to teach a beginner's class is ridiculous. It's a lot of pressure and you barely have any supplies and it's very rushed, but it was a really good learning experience. I probably did about 4 classes with them. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go on and do my own from there. So then you have to worry about all the other stuff like venue hire, catering, all that kind of fun stuff. There's a lot in it. And I think if you're wanting to start out somewhere, have a look at what other people are doing. I know a lot of people use the venues I used to use because they've obviously had a little look. And I think it's worth, studying what other people give in their kits, kind of like what their workbooks look like to give you an idea of what the expectation is, and the pricing as well. My pricing for my workshop was dictated by other people at the time, and I haven't changed it in 2 years. I don't know whether I should, but yeah, I just kind of studied what other people were doing and went from there.
So I think that's a really good point, because I get a lot of comments from people who are worried about, they don't have a huge following and they're not sure whether there's going to be interest for it. And I think that goes for anything in your business. Kind of pre-validating it is a really good idea. And how you started it was really smart by, going to a place that had the audience. And I think that's a really smart way for anybody who's worrying about that part to go. Not only because they already have the audience, but because after you do one, just like Emma said, you'll know what exactly you need to change for the next one. Because I can tell you from teaching my first one to teaching my 100th one, a lot has changed. So what are, like, name a couple things that you changed after you ran your first one to how you do them today?
I literally was reading off a piece of paper because I was so nervous that I was going to forget something important, and I wanted everything important to be mentioned, and it stuffed me up hugely. I just sounded like a robot. It wasn't fun, and I threw that in the bin pretty quickly. So it does take practice. I think maybe as a starting point, if we go back even further, how do you know if you're ready to teach? I think you need to prove that you can teach someone. So why don't you grab a friend or a family member, take them through a mock class and see if they actually can understand it And if they've got no experience with it, they're going to ask you questions that you're going to get in a workshop. And I get off on that thrill of like a question that's like, ooh, that's a good one. But you have to be prepared to answer it. If you're there and you're like, oh, I'm not like, they're going to know that you're not confident in what you're doing. So you need to be prepared to answer those. So testing it on someone is great. And I've definitely changed that method. Now I can kind of run a brush lettering class without thinking twice about it because I've done it so many times. But in the beginning, I was really stuck on what to say. Also I said that there might not be a laneway learning place like that in the rest of the world, but a lot of venues I've noticed overseas will actually, they just run workshops. There's places in America that just exist to run workshops. So contact one of those if you're looking for a venue, because they then have the database for you.
Yeah, so oftentimes they'll take a bigger cut of your workshop profits for that. And once you've taught a lot of them, you tend to not want that to happen. So you're more comfortable doing it. It's definitely a good way to start and to get your name out there. And the word of mouth spreads so quickly if you just teach a couple people and their friends. So another good way would be just to literally have a calligraphy workshop at your house and ask people to just pay for the supplies. Invite your friends and tell your friends to bring one friend each or something. So you know half the people, you don't know half the people. So it's a little less intimidating, but those people are going to post pictures about it and they're going to tell their friends, and it just gradually builds from there. And more people are going to want to learn from you if you're doing a good job. So, but definitely, like you said, you need to make sure you know your stuff. And the same questions tend to come up. So as soon as you do one, you're going to know what you're going to need to answer for the next one. And it gets easier and easier, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, quick and easy question. If you're going to do an intro to brush calligraphy class, how many hours is it? How much does it cost? And what's in the kit?
So I do 3-hour classes. They are $150 per person, and then about $50 worth of supplies. So there's nothing I hate more than paying a ton of money and going to a workshop and either you don't get to keep the stuff or you get like one pen that's already run out of ink by the end. I've never been about that. I've always wanted to give more. And I think especially with brush lettering, when you're learning, we all gravitate towards different pens and you need a variety to see what works for you. So in my kit, I give a pad of rhodia paper and we have a bunch of different pens. We have a Tombow and then the Australian equivalent, the Mikador, Artline sticks, Pentel Touch, Ecoline brush pen, and a, did I already say Pentel Touch? No, Crayola, that's the other one. Because I find that with left-handed people, they often gravitate more towards the Crayola. So if they're having a really hard time with regular brush pens, then that's a good fallback as well. And I think that's all I have for brush lettering. And then there's just the decorative stuff that comes into that as well, whether you have like fun stuff on the table, personalized bags or name tags, that kind of stuff. But they're the tools that I give. And worksheets.
And then the one other thing that I see come up a lot, and I got a lot of questions about it leading up to this workshop, was I know, and this is actually kind of perfect for you because I know that you didn't have a background with Adobe Illustrator or anything like that. How did you go about making the workbook for your first workshop?
All of my worksheets, even up till now, are made in Microsoft Word. I'm such a dork. I don't like using those programs. I now know how to digitize my stuff in there, but in terms of the actual grid, it's still in Microsoft, and I'm not super proud to say that, but it works. It just, I just grew up on PCs and Microsoft, so I feel comfortable with it. I just chuck a table in, print it out, make sure it's the right size, and then now I can import like higher res versions of my lettering in there. But there's definitely a lot of tutorials out there. I can just be a bit, lazy and I want the quick solution, so I haven't really looked into it. But obviously when they're done like that, like Becca's workbooks, they look a lot fancier, but you don't need to know it to be able to make them.
But I also am really happy you said that, because I always want to encourage people to understand that it's not necessarily about how the workbook looks. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be functional. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is teach somebody calligraphy, and you're doing it live. So you're there with them. You're walking them through it. They're going to be doing stuff on separate pieces of paper and on that rhodia pad you gave them. So as long as you're able to walk them through something that they can reference in front of them, it doesn't matter if it's made on Word or if it's beautifully laid out. Having nothing is better, or having something is better than nothing. So I mean, if all you can do is use Microsoft Word at this point, then don't be discouraged by that, because clearly it's working for Emma.
For sure. And I think it's easy to get intimidated by other people's stuff. Like every day I see a new person that I follow teaching workshops, and I'll look at their workbooks and be like, damn, that's cool, or whatever. And I think in America as well, stuff is so much cheaper to produce. And, you know, they've got these spiral bound books and all these fancy letterpress covers. And in reality here, if I did that, I wouldn't have much of a business. So I think, you know, live within your means as well. And you don't need the fancy kind of stuff to get the job done.
Yeah, I think it's better to think about, you know, making your event really high quality and making the content really good, rather than
it's how you make people feel.
Yeah, you can fix those things later and make it better and better, but the content is more important than how it looks, for sure.
That's actually a really good point. The experience itself should be fun and lighthearted, and not like you're standing at the classroom telling them off or whatever. They're really not going to give a crap what the worksheets look like if they had a blast.
And not to mention that a lot of the ones I see with like those letterpress and spiral bound and all the, like, they go to a florist and get it completely done, and there's like a archway of flowers when you come in and everything. Is like, you know, if you look at the ticket price of those events, that's not necessarily something that the average person wants to go out and just have, you know, a girls' night to do. That's more people who are ready to take their calligraphy like to the serious next level, which if it's your first time teaching a workshop, you're not teaching those people. You're teaching the people who are just learning calligraphy, and they just want you to tell them what to do with a brush pen and how to hold it. They don't need the bells and whistles.
Absolutely. The less intimidating, the better.
Yeah. So, okay. I think that's kind of, we've talked a lot already. But I think if we had to do one more like main talking point, I think we should just ask you, if you were to go back at the very beginning, what would you give as advice to someone else who is in those shoes?
I think the best thing to do is just take it one step at a time. You know, the internet is somewhere that can be very overwhelming, and a lot of people don't feel good enough because they keep comparing themselves to other people and, oh, why aren't I at that level yet? Why aren't I doing that yet? I think you just have to focus on you, focus on what's realistic with your time frame, your skill level, your budget. You know, if you're just learning calligraphy starting a week ago, you shouldn't really be thinking about workshops just yet. You should still be in that learning and then building my tribe phase. So I think just one day at a time. It's great to have obviously goals and dreams, but as long as you're working towards them in a positive way and not getting discouraged and down on yourself, because I've seen a lot of people come undone. Unfortunately, like great people that I know in real life that just can't make it happen because they get too affected by outside influences.
They just get like bogged down by all the details, like the making a workbook for your workshops kind of thing. I hear so many people that want to teach and they just like get stuck on that one thing and can't move past it. But I love what you said about just one little step every day, work towards it slowly, and eventually it'll come. I always like to say, I don't know where this quote comes from. I should probably figure it out, but done is better than perfect. So especially when you're starting, get something done. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be made on Microsoft Word, but it's getting you somewhere. It's moving the needle in the right direction. I love that.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I would say is go and talk to people. Like there's a lot of people that, yeah, they have this expectation that they're going to make this business ginormous straight away, but then they're so like closed off. They're not sharing themselves, they're not sharing with their followers, and they're not making connections in the community. And the best thing about our community is that people on all levels are happy to talk to each other and share information. And I think it's going to benefit you more if you get amongst that than you try and resist it and, you know, be something separate from it. You need to get amongst it. And that's the best way to learn anything. And I encourage people to not only do it within our community, but go and talk to random people. Like you mentioned that you do calligraphy to someone who works in a completely different field, and they might just spark an idea that you never would have got from anywhere else. So it's worth networking.
Sure. I mean, I think you and I are a good example, because if anybody is listening to this and doesn't know the history between Emma and I think it was like both of us had very similar stories. So we had started probably right around the same time doing calligraphy and posting our stuff on Instagram. And I think Emma posted something like rude. She posted one of her rude greetings. And I thought it was so funny because I had just made one really similar to that like a week before. And I just sent her an email, or not even an email, an Instagram message, I think. And I just said, hey, I thought that was really funny. I think we should talk more. I think we'd be friends. And that was it. And now we're still in touch and we're doing this interview, and we just hung out in Australia for 2 weeks and drove down the coast and met all of our students and stuff. So, I mean, simple things like that, they make such a big difference. And you can't live in fear of, you know, the competition. You just got to be friends with people. I think that's such a good point.
Reach out. Don't be afraid to like or comment someone's work.
Love it. So, okay, we're going to do kind of a lightning round because there's questions in the group that people had submitted that we didn't really touch on. I'm just going to shoot them on the screen and you're going to answer them, and we're going to move on to the next one. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Cecilia asked, what inspires your work?
Everything. I just take notice of I take notice of just everything. Travel is probably the biggest one. I find that when I'm away from real life and I don't have that, like, just the nagging pressures of paying bills or whatever, then I can relax and I'm more open to new ideas. But day to day, if I'm at home, I always look on places like the Explore tab to try and find art forms other than calligraphy. I think if you just look at calligraphy, you're not going to get inspired to do something different or new. So look at other art forms and take inspiration from them.
Cool. Okay. Kara asked, how many hours a week do you invest in your business on average?
That's a really hard question to answer. All of them. It's my full-time job. I work on it every single day. You know, don't get me wrong, there are days when I might be flat and I might just think, oh, I'll reply to a couple emails and that's it. But there are times where it's just go, go, go from like 4:30 in the morning and I'm still doing stuff 14 hours later. It depends on what's happening at the time. There's obviously, it comes in peaks and troughs depending on the time of the year. Mother's Day is always a busy time. Christmas, the start of the year is generally pretty quiet. It all depends, but I can't put a number on it. Sorry.
If you had to say yes or no, do you spend more time on your business doing this than you did in your full-time job?
Oh, 100% yes. Yeah. But it's because it's yours and because you love it. It doesn't feel like work.
Okay. That would be my answer too. Okay. Kara asked another great question. What's your most favorite part of your business and your least favorite?
Favorite part is creating and talking to other people and just connecting with other people that like art, and you get like a fun buzz off it. Least favorite is admin. I hate emails. I just do. My inbox is always crazy. And yeah, the days where you're just stuck doing actual business stuff, which reality check, there's a lot more of those than there are of creating. They're a bit of a downer. So anytime I actually am creating and talking to other people, that's a big highlight.
Another question I'm just going to throw in here. How many emails are in your inbox right now?
I'm not bad at the moment. A couple of weeks ago, I had about 700. I'm down to about 200 now, but there's only probably like maybe 5 or 10 that are like actionable. The rest is just stuff that needs to be sorted and put away.
Oh, and actually, okay, so that leads us to our next question, which is from Barbara and Maria, both asked this. Do you have help and have you hired anyone?
Yes. So last year, it was probably this time last year, I felt like I needed help. Back then, though, I was still wanting to work full time, and I just thought, well, if I'm going to take it anywhere, I need someone else who can invest their free time in the business. So I looked for an assistant, and then I went on holidays while I was recruiting, and I thought up penultimate. So then I needed a graphic designer, and so luckily I had two amazing people, Nikki and Rachel, apply both for the assistant role, but Nikki had graphic design experience. So she works for me on a contract basis. I don't know how things work overseas, but she works for me solely on that project. And then Rach is more in the business as a casual employee, and she will just help out with whatever needs helping with.
Just gotta say, I'm jealous of both of them. Actually, no, I'm jealous of you for having both of them.
Yeah, they have such a great boss. You should be.
Okay, fine, both ways, whatever. Okay, this is a good one. I'm curious to see what your answer is for this one. Barbara asked, how does the business stuff impact your creativity and the simple joy of creating art? Because I know this is a big one for me, and it was a big one when I started out. I noticed how this changed.
Yeah, I might be a bit different from some people though, because I grew up in the business world. I have a Bachelor of Business. I do like the business stuff, and some of it excites me. Like, you know, you and I have had chats before, particularly last year, about all these different things you can try and do and whatever, all the strategies. And I find that exciting. But if we're talking about day-to-day business stuff, like just, you know, maintaining databases or whatever, that stuff bores the hell out of me and I don't enjoy it at all. So on those days, it's probably when I need creativity the most, but I don't feel like it. As I said, things come in peaks and troughs. There'll be days where I'm like having a sick art day, making all the things, and then I feel better about doing business stuff. And then there's days where I just hate doing both of them.
I find that I have days where I feel like I need to be creating, and I get really into the business stuff. I actually enjoy doing the business stuff as well. And I feel like, oh crap, I should really post something on Instagram. I should really create something right now. And it's just not, I'm just not there. It's not coming as naturally because my brain is in the business side. So it's hard. It's definitely hard to balance both. And it changes when it's something that you're managing as a business versus just posting stuff on Instagram for fun.
Yeah, I feel like when I had a full-time job, I had more time for Instagram because it wasn't that much of a big deal, the business side. But then when it becomes your sole focus, it's like this huge juggling act that you just have to try and manage.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Two more. Pamela asked, are you planning to review the palettiquette classes? Can you, first, before you answer it, can you kind of explain what that is for people who don't know?
Yeah, so if you look behind me, there are like infinity color wheels. Basically, it was a free color theory challenge that I launched in Jan just to give people some more background on color theory. You know, it's something that can take any person's artwork to the next level. And the whole idea behind the challenge was learning how to create between 150 and 200 colors out of just the three primaries. And I find that stuff so fun. There's like this dorky amount of science in there as well. But basically we did that class and then that led on to monthly painting classes that have a topic. So at the moment we're doing woodlands and wildflowers, and we've done a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So I'm not really sure what the question means about redoing it. I am restarting the color theory class. So in July, it'll run again, the free one. Anyone can join. Just have to sign up at learn.blackchalkco.com, but I'm not like rerunning the classes that are already there. That they're there if anyone wants to take them.
Yeah, I think she probably meant the challenge part.
So that's sure. July.
And what's the link for that again if people want to sign up?
Yep, so it's learn.blackchalkco.com.
Okay. Okay, and we have one more serious one and one more quick one, and then we're going to open it up for everybody to ask more rapid fire questions before we end up. We have about 12 minutes left. So Nancy asked, well, this is a bit of a heavy topic, so we'll cut it down a little bit. But Nancy asked, what are your top 3 strategies for marketing your courses, workshops, and art? So maybe if we like just focus on Instagram. I think a lot of people wonder about Instagram. So what are your top 3 tips and strategies for Instagram?
I guess I don't think too much about this kind of stuff. I just like to make stuff and put it out there. But stories is definitely a strategy. Creating Facebook stories and posting them, that's a whole nother topic on like branding as well, and like connecting with your audience, not just to, you know, market courses, workshops, and art. It's just to build a relationship with your following. And I think that's obviously a really good way to do it, because sometimes people miss your posts, but that your stories are generally always up the top, so they might have more of a chance of seeing them. I think regular posting as well, people still obviously pay attention to those. Video content is awesome for Instagram. And then I suppose it's still related to stories, but I've really been loving highlights, and I think they're so awesome. And, you know, you can start following someone who you've got no idea about, but then they've got all these amazing resources under their highlights with tips and tricks and, you know, their latest news. And I think it's really important to switch over to a business profile if you haven't already and set some of those up. So it's almost like having a blog on your Instagram.
Cool. I like all of those. And then, okay, the last question, maybe the most important question you're going to ever get, and especially the most important question on this live. What is your favorite?
Oh, I think black chalk is pretty synonymous with the Artline Sticks brush marker. There's no getting around that. It's been a favourite of mine since, over 2 years ago. Although I have tried to, broaden my horizons lately. I do really love, as a premium brand, the Winsor & Newton watercolour markers. They're not really designed for brush lettering, but they have a brush tip and it's just magical. And maybe because it comes in Payne's Grey, it's won me over, but my go-to is Artline Sticks.
Can you show us Artline Sticks? Because not the rest of the world doesn't have such easy access to them as Australia.
Bear with me.
I'm going to put this on full screen so people can see.
Oh, I can't pull out a drawer, but I have an entire drawer of them. But anyway, this is what they look like. They look like Lego pens, but they do come in 3 different types. So you have to get the one that's got a brush tip on it.
Very important.
And they're only like $1, bargain.
Yeah, unless you live in North America.
You guys get everything else. We need something.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left. Let's just open this up and let some questions roll in, and I will pop them up on the screen as they come up. So again, I'll try to do this pretty quickly. So there's a couple that came up as we were talking. I'll just put this one up right away. So do you think this field is reaching saturation?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think as long as you can be different, then that's a good thing. There is a lot of people that are kind of like the same. But if you can find a point of differentiation, whatever that may be, then that will help you. For me, penultimate was my differentiation. I didn't want to do the same thing that everyone else was doing. And I did feel stuck about a year ago. I thought that everything that could be done in calligraphy has been done, but you keep seeing new stuff all the time. So I think it's important to think outside the box. And if you're serious about it, be someone who creates something new, don't just follow.
And I think that another thing I always want to add on to that is to just learn calligraphy, like learn lettering, learn whatever you're going to learn, and then be inspired by a million different places and put them all into one and come up with your own style. Don't just copy the next person because you like their style. I think that's really, really hard on Instagram these days because it's so easy to just find one person you admire and do everything they do, but it's really important, especially because there's so many people doing it now.
And that's what's so good about your workbooks is, and I teach the same kind of stuff. It's the basics because we don't want you guys to learn our style because that's something that we've perfected over the years and we're known for that style, and you should want to be known for yours as well. So definitely start with the basics, but yeah, look around and be inspired by different things and create something of your own.
Okay, let's do some more. How do you become a brand ambassador?
I was approached. I don't know about you with Tombow, but I was approached by Winsor & Newton out of the blue. I use their paints, obviously, but I hadn't been using a large amount of their products. So I don't know. I guess I've seen a lot of people, I suppose if you're wanting to become one, you probably want to have a favorite brand and use them pretty religiously, and that might put you in good stead. But I was just approached, so I'm not really sure what the protocol was.
I think typically they approach you, but a good way to be noticed by them is to tag them. If you're using a product that you love, them every time you use it and you post about it, and they'll notice you eventually. And just be very positive about their products. And if they don't notice you, reach out, find the person to talk to and send them an email and let them know that you're interested in doing it. And you know what? Some companies don't have a brand ambassador program, so you could be their main person. If you like a product and you haven't seen a program, make one. Approach them and work with them and just be open to possibilities.
I tried that with Artline 2 years ago. It still hasn't paid off. So you know what? Sometimes you just got to keep moving.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What platform do you recommend to teach online courses?
I would always recommend the one that I use, which is Teachable, but I was having a think about this question, and it's so dependent on your situation. Everything costs money, and you have to be sure that, like, say you just want to put out free course content, then it wouldn't really make sense to go and pay a whole bunch of money for a paid platform. So you might want to do something like Skillshare instead. So unless you're sure you're going to at least make back the money that you have to pay to use the platform, that's going to be a pretty big deciding factor. So I started with my online school before anyone else was really using an external platform. So I just kind of had to wing it. But I love Teachable. It works perfectly for what I do, which is now having a ton of classes and being able to manage a ton of students. But if I was starting out like way back in the beginning, it'd probably be something like Skillshare that comes with a ready-made audience and is very easy to use.
Okay. This is a very important one that, you know what, we didn't touch on and we should have. At what point did you feel comfortable leaving your corporate job to take on your business full time?
A very personal kind of decision, I think, but at the point where I just actually felt sick going to work. I had wanted to leave my job in April last year, and I'd actually resigned but that job was actually making me pretty upset anyway. And I was like, why am I wasting my time here when I could be, having fun building my own business that I enjoy? So I did that, and then straight away I got picked up for a job where I knew the people there. So I felt like I had to do it. But 4 months into it, I was kind of twiddling my thumbs and just started resenting it. I started resenting that I was wasting all these hours every day that I could be putting into something that I loved. But obviously, you have to be in a position as well that you're not just going to like go broke in 2 seconds. So whether that means having a bunch of money saved up to fall back on, or already being at a point where you can sustain yourself, that you have to like take a logical risk, I would call it.
Cool. Okay, we'll do one more and then just chat a little bit for the ending here. So a couple people are asking about digitizing. And interesting because we talked about this and how you use Microsoft Word, but you said you've learned digitizing since then. Someone asked how important is it, and someone else is asking what is your favorite tutorial for it?
I think it's only important if you want to be in the digital space. If you're predominantly making original artwork, then there's not really much reason to learn it, I suppose. I couldn't even tell you my favorite tutorial. I think I followed one of yours, Becca, that's been on your blog. I think there's been a couple in online courses that I've paid for, like Modern Calligraphy Summit or something. But I think in the end, I end up using whatever technique my graphic designer prefers, because I end up digitizing a lot of stuff to go in the magazine for her. So there's a few different ways to do it. So I think finding whatever's quick and easiest for you is the best. I mean, Becca, she had to digitize something for me a year or two ago because I got asked to put lettering in a magazine and I had no idea what I was doing. But it definitely, yeah.
Friends with people.
Exactly. Outsource. Nah, I think it depends what you want to do. If you just want to create original art, there's not really a need. But if you do want prints or to jazz up worksheets or a website, then yeah, you're going to need to learn the basics.
Well, and just a quick note about that too is now you can do lettering on an iPad, so that cuts a lot of the work out for digitizing if you're into iPad lettering too. Okay.
Very true.
So we're just about out of time. I'm going to pop up your contact information on here, but just as a kind of closing, can you give us like a little insight on what's going on in your world, what people can expect from you moving forward, and kind of what's new and exciting?
Yeah, so business as usual in terms of like running workshops in person and doing, business to business client work, that'll all tick along. I've got my magazine, which is a bi-monthly publication, so Penultimate Magazine. Looks like this, and we interview really cool people like her. And so that's an ongoing thing for me. The palettiquette color theory class, as I said, will start again in July, and then there's monthly classes that you can drop in and out of as you please. I have a book which is officially released on the 1st of June called Brush Lettering from A to Z, but people have already started receiving it because Amazon is magical. And what else? I am going on a holiday soon, which is fun. It's still kind of a work holiday. I'm going to a conference in America, and then I'm actually doing It's so first world. I'm going to a calligraphy course in Italy, which should be really fun. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Well, I think we covered a lot of topics today. I hope people have been taking notes, but if not, this will be available for replay. And there were a lot of questions that came in here at the bottom that just so everybody knows, we have a lot of other people lined up to come in and talk about business related things. So a lot of those things are going to be covered in the future, I promise. But Emma and I will definitely take a look at those questions and see if we can't put our heads together and answer some of them quickly for you. But other than that, I think it's been exactly 1 hour. I got to say, that's pretty cool. Yeah, we nailed that timing. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks Emma for all that wisdom and knowledge. You can find Emma at those links that are right down below, and we'll see all of you guys next week on Monday again, and I'll announce who the next interview is very soon. So,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Talk to you later.